Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight as we are on day 4 of our week-long Facebook Live series around the budget. Today, we will be talking about the city's infrastructure departments and their budgets. I have with me today Commissioner Biagi from the Department of Transportation, Commissioner Randy Connor from the Department of Water Management, and Commissioner John Tully from the Department of Streets and Sanitation. Like I do every night, we're going to start off with a quick overview of all of their departments' budgets. For those who want to follow along at home, the data and graphics for this discussion can be found at chicago.gov/budget dashboard. All right, let's start with the Department of Transportation. CDOT manages the city's transportation infrastructure. In 2020, CDOT's budget was nearly $468 million, primarily comprised of grant funds. More than 60% of CDOT's budget is for contractual services related to construction projects. Commissioner Biagi, can you tell us a little bit about some of the key initiatives CDOT is currently focused on?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And, you know, before we talk about the key initiatives, I should say a little bit about our Department of Transportation, which is truly one of the biggest in the country and has some of the most complicated infrastructure. And so we're everything from streets to streetlights, alleys. We help manage 150 miles of our shoreline and river system. You know, we have, 4,000 miles of streets plus 2,000 miles of alleys plus 7,000 miles of sidewalks. So you get a sense of the magnitude of what we're managing. And so we're doing work every day to keep that infrastructure up to date, to also do new projects that expand it, that make it more innovative. But then we're also working on policy, and that is thinking about how people move around the city, what we can do as an infrastructure department to make that possible, because at the end of the day, we're trying to connect the dots between where people are and those meaningful destinations in their life.
Next, let's talk about water management. The Department of Water Management is responsible for the delivery of water to Chicago residents and our suburban communities. In 2020, water management's budget is $315 million. The Department of Water Management's budget is primarily supported by enterprise funds, which are funds that are established to account for the operation and maintenance of a specific services, in this case, the city's water and sewer infrastructure. These funds are self-supporting, which means these services are paid for with user fees by people using our system. Commissioner Connor, can you tell us more about the services provided by water management?
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, good evening, and it's good to be here to talk about what the Department of Water Management does. So first of all, we are one of the top 3 largest water departments, the distribution systems in the country, with about 4,400 miles of water main that we have to maintain. Of that 4,400 miles of water main, we are able to distribute water to not only the city of Chicago, but we also distribute water to 123 suburbs, right? So that, which accounts to be about 44% of the population of the state of Illinois. Wow. But to be able to do that, we have 2 of the world's largest filtration plants, one being Sawyer on the south side, and let's say that was the first one built for the city of Chicago when the water system was built, and its capacity is about 750 million gallons, and which is the 8th largest in the world. Then we have Jardine, which is right by Navy Pier, that is the world's largest at 1.2 billion gallons of water per day. But that's not all that we do. We also have the sewer side of the department, where we maintain about 4,300 miles of sewer main that range from the size of 6-inch to about 21 feet in diameter. And we transport wastewater as well as rainwater to our counterparts at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District.
Thank you. Okay. The Department of Streets and Sanitation's budget in 2020 was more than $273 million, primarily comprised of personnel costs. The largest portion of the Streets and Sanitation's personnel budget is for waste collection, which includes garbage and recycling operations. Commissioner Tully, can you tell us more about the services that Streets and Sanitation provides?
Sure. Thank you. The Department of Streets and Sanitation is the 3rd largest budget in the city. Outside of police and fire department, we have the largest budget. Most people know the nuts and bolts services that the department provides, which is refuse and recycling pickup, as well as snow removal services. But we also service all forestry operations, tree removals, tree trimming, stump removal. We provide rodent abatement throughout the city. We also do graffiti removal. And in addition to that, we do provide a large number of support services for all of the special events throughout the city, both the large events as well as the neighborhood events.
Okay. All right, let's start with our first question. So all of you talked about how your departments are each distinct, but there's also a lot of areas where I know all three of you collaborate. Can you give us some examples of some cross-departmental collaboration that you do?
Yeah, well, I'll take a stab at it because I think we're sitting socially distanced but next to each other right now because it's an example of how our teams work together every day. We all have a stake in our streets and our sidewalks and what's underneath them and what's above them, and so we have to work together. So we have things like our project coordination office where anytime anyone's digging in the ground, we coordinate that with water if they're doing it, with the other utilities that might be doing it. We make sure Streets and Sand is aware of what's going on, and so it's this collaborative, really roundtable of all the major departments, including ours, that need to know about that. That enables us to coordinate our capital program. But when it comes to streets, we're not the only ones who are taking care of them, but our friends at the Water Department are doing their fair share of making sure that your streets are in good condition.
Absolutely. So the way we collaborate with the Department of Transportation is that because we are we install water mains as well as sewer mains, we're the lowest ones in the hole, right? So we try to make sure that when we get in there that everything else is done. But when it comes to the restoration, that's where the collaboration comes in. So we take a look at the street condition when we're there, and generally when we're there for a water main project, we only resurface half the width of the street. But what we're taking a look at now is we're looking at the PCI, which is the Pavement Condition Index, as well as how much damage we did as a department to that infrastructure, that above ground infrastructure, and then we take that into consideration and we're able to resurface the entire street, which then, in essence, doesn't have to allow CDOT to spend more money on resurfacing or for us to have to bother the budget director to get more money to try to resurface streets. But also with that, it's a collaboration with Streets and Sand as well, because they do a lot of tree trimming for us when we go through so we can do our work. They do tree removal where we have to be complying with the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. But one thing that we collaborate on that the neighborhood sees the benefit of is when we do our sewer work, a week before, 2 weeks before we come in to do the sewer work and start digging into the sewers, the Department of Streets and Sanitation, Bureau of Road Control comes in and they bait for us. So that way you don't get the influx of rats that live in the sewer out into the neighborhood. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, there's a large collaboration between the departments. Particularly I'm thinking of is what we've been doing with the Mayor Lightfoot's Invest Southwest program. We've been doing a number of both public safety related as well as cleanup in some areas that may have not received the attention they have in prior years. So we go out and do a lot of tree trimming, as Commissioner Connor indicated. We also go out and clean vacant lots, looking to see where there may be weapons harbored. So there's a large amount of collaboration. There's also the weather-related things that happen. Just during the past couple weeks, we had a large tree storm, windstorm, where there actually was a tornado that hit in Rogers Park. We had 11,000 tree emergencies, and thanks to my colleagues here and their departments, we were able to clear up the emergencies within a 2-week period. There's still a lot of work to do, but they'll continue to support, and we support them when needed, as well as with winter weather.
Excellent.
Too.
Many people may not immediately think of how infrastructure departments have a role in the response to COVID-19, but I know everyone's been working also a lot on our response as well. Commissioner Biagi, can you tell us about how CDOT has worked on pandemic response?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And what you're looking at are several departments who, when we had the stay-at-home order, we didn't have folks who could stay at home. We actually had to keep doing the work that we do every day. And so by being out in the streets, continuing to fill potholes, continuing to make sure that curb and gutters are doing great, continuing to fix the lights, that's all things that happened throughout, has never stopped during the pandemic. So that's sort of the day-to-day work that we've been doing. But we've also been able to take this opportunity to launch some new initiatives that kind of fit in with where we're going, where we're headed in terms of transportation policy. So the Our Streets program that we launched had a number of ways that we were able to reimagine what happens in your streets. For example, our shared street program. So this is putting in some traffic calming, that's cones, it's some barricades to make a street easy for people to walk, easy to bike. It calms the traffic. We have 10 miles of shared streets across the city, across 125 blocks. That it's this new way of using the public way that gives you that little extra social distance that you need. The other thing we've been doing is working with a couple of other departments like Consumer Protection and Department of Culture and Special Events to create our outdoor dining program, Make Way for Dining. And so what that's doing is a couple of things. One, we're again taking more of our public way that we share together, right? This is all, we own the streets, all of us, and we're deciding together as a community to use them in ways that support things that the city needs. And in this case, it's the restaurant industry. So not only are the outdoor dining locations creating destinations for Chicagoans to be able to go outside, to be able to be safe and social distance, but also to inject funds into our local economy. That's jobs, that's restaurants that can perform, that's supply chains that are still kept online. And so when you start to connect the dots between what COVID, sort of the parameters it put us within, and the creativity that comes out of it, I think you'll see that across all of our departments, that we've been able to do more in this context, maybe more than we thought we could otherwise.
All right, next question. Recently, the city experienced a major storm and even a tornado, which I know Commissioner Tully just talked about. Many trees were impacted by the storm. Can you tell us a little bit about Streets and Sanitation's response to that?
Sure. Well, with each storm, our main priority is first to clear the public way, clear the main thoroughfare so that safety vehicles can come and go and respond. This particular storm that we had over a couple weeks ago was different from the rest. We haven't seen anything like it probably since 2012. The damage that was caused was throughout the city. It wasn't just in certain areas. So it necessitated a large response, and thanks to the help of the other departments, we were able to clear the 12,000 emergencies that we saw, which meant that we were able to cut these large trees down where needed, put them on the parkway. Now we're in the situation for the next few weeks where we'll be coming back to pick up the debris that's left on the parkways and also start to assess what other damage that might have occurred and through inspections throughout the city. The last phase will be trying to replace the trees that were damaged. Our tree canopy is very important to us. It reduces the heat, and we're very conscious of what we need to do with that. So in this upcoming budget, we have $1.7 million to go out and start to replace those trees that were damaged, and we'll continue to do that until everything that was damaged will be replaced.
Great. Speaking of trees, we do have questions about how does your department decide where to plant trees? Is there a plan to increase the number of plantings?
Sure. With tree planting, much of our activity revolves around citizen service requests. So just by calling 311, people can request a new tree. We also take a look at where there may have been damage from not only just storms, but there's been infestations of Asian ash borer, as well as other years past Dutch elm disease. So we do take a look at that, and we also have a strategic plan to go out into areas that may need more coverage than they've had, for flooding purposes, to protect from flooding as well.
Okay. Okay, lead service lines. I know they've been, we've had a lot of discussion about that. We've got questions about it. So Commissioner Connor, can you give us a little more information about, where we are with lead service lines and what your department is working on?
Absolutely, but first I want to start this out by saying that the City of Chicago water system, it's safe. There's nothing wrong with the water. It meets or beats and exceeds every federal regulation and every state regulation, and those are the things that we're very, very proud of, right? Because we like to let everybody know that we have the best water in the country. So the water is safe. But as far as the lead service lines, it's a huge undertaking that it's going to be a partnership not not only with the water department, but with the other departments as well as the citizens of Chicago. Everybody's going to have to play a part in this in some shape, form, or fashion. So over the past few years, we've been putting together a program to try to figure out what this is going to look like. There are about 400,000 lead service lines in the city of Chicago, which is probably it's the most in the country for any urban city. And because we are an urban city, we have to ensure that the other federal regulations are that we abide by the other federal regulations as far as water separation from sewer, from other utilities. So as we're building this program, these are all the things that we have to take into account to ensure that when we do it, we go in once and a one time only. So that way we only have to disturb the ground once and disturb the residents. But it's going to be a situation where this isn't something that's going to happen in 1 year or 5 years to complete. You're talking a multi-year program that's going to cost multi-dollars, basically. So we have to figure out what that's going to look like, and how we figure that out is we do different pilots. We figure out where in the city we can start digging, where we think that the worst or the worst scenario is, so we can see exactly what we're up against.
Right.
And here, again, this is where we collaborate with our partners with CDOT to talk about, as we're putting the cost together, what are the regulations going to look like for restoration, right? Because they have their rules and regs for restoration that we have to abide by. Same thing it is with Department of Streets and Sanitation, with forestry, with whatever the forestry rules are with tree removals and tree plantings and things of that nature. So once we put all that in the bucket and shake it up and we roll it all out, we can pull out the things that we need. We've talked to other cities, we've talked to other, and other municipalities to see what they're doing. And we can take their wins and their losses and really try to build a program that's really going to be something that will fit the city of Chicago. This is not a program that if we took it from Detroit and brought it to Chicago, it won't work. Detroit's infrastructure is different from ours.
Right.
We definitely can't take it from someplace like Willowbrook, who may have the problem because it's all open land, right?
Wow.
It's, again, we live in a concrete jungle, basically. We have a lot of urban infrastructure that we have to account for.
Okay, speaking of water, the city introduced the Utility Billing Relief Program. Can you give us a little more information about that?
Absolutely. So this is actually a program that we're all excited about. It was something that collaboration between the Department of Water Management, Department of Finance, OBM, as well as the Mayor's Office to figure out how is it that the city, how can we give relief to the citizens of Chicago, especially during this time, during COVID, even just with the way that the economy has been going. And what we discovered is that by coming up with the utility billing relief program, we based it on the same criteria as LIHEAP, right? And it's a system where you have to meet certain criteria to be able to fit into the program. But once you're in the program, it's great, because if your bill is whatever your bill is, you are told that you have to pay X amount of dollars for 12 months, and once you pay that amount of money over 12 months and you haven't missed a bill or you're not late on a bill, then whatever that past bill is, it's wiped. And you're starting fresh, you're starting clean. And again, it's a type of situation where we have to understand and realize that we're in a time where money is short and we have to start looking to do things differently.
And I've seen with our utility billing relief program that the applications and the participants that are joining this program has grown.
It has. I know we're somewhere around over 6,000 people that have called. Wow. And again, it's a great program, and we're encouraging people to sign up to apply for it.
Great. Okay, we have a question from Corey Lewis. How are we prioritizing making our streets more safe for pedestrian and cycling commuters, especially in the wake of coronavirus? Can we allocate money to increasing access and safety of bike lanes throughout the city?
Yeah, I'm glad this question's here, because I didn't get a chance yet to talk about one of our major initiatives, which is Vision Zero. So Vision Zero is the idea that every traffic crash, every fatality from a traffic crash is fundamentally preventable. And we're talking about particularly pedestrians and cyclists. And so that is a larger framework, and it's actually an international framework that we've adopted here in Chicago, but we've engineered it to make sense for our neighborhoods, listening really well to communities to define what it is that we need to do. So what do you do with that? How do you make it safer? It's a number of things. It's everything from actually the built infrastructure, so creating things like pedestrian safety islands that narrows the distance you need to cross when you walk across the street. It's working with signalization, things called bump outs, protected bike lanes. There's a lot that we can do in the investments that we make in our infrastructure to make it safer for pedestrians and cyclists alike. But the way that we get there, right, that's a lot of tools. Like, I've got a lot of things in the toolbox, but we can't get there well if we're not listening to communities across the city. And every neighborhood's different, every amount of traffic is different, speeds are different, all of these things. And so we have launched regional plans through Vision Zero. So in fact, we just completed the West Side Vision Zero plan, which we had thousands of participants, hundreds of meetings to really get down to exactly which blocks and which streets. And we're going to follow through with projects there. And so that's that allocation of money. We are dedicating funds to Vision Zero, as well as we integrate these projects into our larger Complete Streets projects. So there's a lot of funding associated with that. But we're very excited to continue pushing on that. I will add, and I know I'm sucking up all the oxygen here, but I want to add that one of the things that we did this year, we've doubled the number of bikeways that we're building compared to last year, and quintupled the number of bike lanes.
Which means times five.
That we've striped across the city. And so that's just an example of what we've been able to do in the last 2 quarters here, and by the end of the year we'll be done with that. We want to do more next year. So I want to finish this by saying that part of the thing is how do we build the network? How do we build connections? In the same way that we're connected in our investments and maintenance and management of the infrastructure, we want to make sure we have the most connected bike network in the country. And so we're looking at those gaps, and we'll be looking forward to filling those in over the next year or so.
Excellent. Okay, talking about rodent control, I think is our next question. Residents across the city want to know more about the city's rodent control response.
Sure. Well, there's a number of things that we've been looking at over the last couple of years. About a year, maybe a little over a year ago, the department was able to tap into some information that a consultant was investigating through the Chicago Zoological Society. They were looking at how rodents contributed to disease and the spread of disease. So we actually had the consultant go out and critique how we handled our abatement program. And what we found out during that study is that the department does a pretty good job overall of baiting areas where there's complaints. We do a good job with that. The problem is that in areas where there's significant infestation, much of what we have to do remains in people's backyards. So in order for us to address that, we have to get permission from the residents to go and bait in people's yards. So we make a concerted effort to engage the community where we have those type of problems. We also use a lot of maps within the Department of Streets and Sanitation, and one of them is called a heat map, which maps out complaints that the residents report through the 311 system. And the thing that struck me when looking at these maps is that there's areas of the city that showed up as bright red where there was a lot of complaints, but yet there were other areas where I knew that there would probably be equal or more infestation that didn't show that. And what that tells me is that there's work either in informing the public on what to look for, and it also tells us that we need to do more work in those areas. So we instituted a grid baiting system in these areas where there may not necessarily be complaints, but there may be issues. We've also instituted a larger public information program on what causes infestation, which predominantly is overflowing containers, garbage cans, as well as people not cleaning up after their pets. So it's something we try to get better every year with.
Speaking of storms, flooding has become more of an issue with several unprecedented rainfalls this year. Commissioner Connor, can you tell us about certain various initiatives that the Water Management Department has been implementing to address flooding across the city?
Absolutely. So I just want to make sure that I preface this by saying that Chicago has probably the second oldest sewer system in the country.
Okay.
Right? And it was built back in the mid-1800s. And because of that, the rainfall then wasn't the way that it is now. So we're getting more 50-year rains, more 100-year rains more frequently, right? Where we're getting 4 to 5 inches of rain within an hour. So the system itself isn't necessarily built to absorb that. So what we've done is, in our modeling, we take a look at a couple of things. We look at the size of the sewer and we figure out should we upsize that pipe, or maybe it's not even where the flooding occurs. It could be someplace downstream. And we will upsize that pipe and put in what we call a tumbling basin, which is able to hold more water, right? So it gets water, you know, into the sewer, but it gets basically into a big tub so that it's eventually pumped out to MWRD. But one of the things that we've really been trying to do to address flooding is to go with more green infrastructure. And we work very closely with CDOT on that, in the sense that they have the Green Alley program where we work in conjunction with them on that. But one of the things that we do is we're taking a look at more permeable surfaces. For instance, we're doing WPA streets, which is one of the things that we collaborate on, where this past year we spent about $10 million on locations throughout the city where we went in and did a green type of infrastructure on that. Instead of building new sewers in the street, we decided to go in and build and put in more grassy areas, put in permeable material. We put in bioswales, places where we could hold more water above ground. And even in those same streets, we put in French drains, or we just put in what we, in the water department, call coffins, basically, that holds the water, then it gives it a chance to infiltrate out into the ground. But we also work with the Department of Buildings on their on the stormwater ordinance, so that when people are going to build, because we have such an urban environment, I keep saying that because everything is all concrete, right? There's no place for the water to go. We're actually encouraging them to hold their stormwater on site and use it for something else. For instance, watering plants, washing the cars if they have a car wash, or things like that. Or if they decide that they're going to hold the water, that eventually it'll percolate out into the ground opposed to rush into the sewer system. But we're also partnering with the Department of Transportation as well as Metropolitan Reclamation District and Center for Green Technology on a program out in the Chatham area where we did a heat map. And what the heat map is, as Commissioner Tully has talked about, it showed where some of the major flooding is within the city. And we chose that area because that's where the biggest of the complaints were. Even though we know that there are other areas that flood, but this is where we're looking. And what we did was we're partnering to go in and talk to the residents and say, hey, we know you're flooding, we know this is happening, we want to partner with you. By partnering with them, we're able to invest about $600,000 into about 40 homes. And what that's going to do, and this is all pre-COVID actually, and we're actually getting back on track with it now, is to invest in the homes to put in more rain blockers, to put in more green spaces in the parkways, to take a look at vacant lots to see if there's a way for us to divert water to the vacant lots, right? So that way it gets off the street and not into people's homes. We're also putting in system so water doesn't back up back into the houses when the system becomes overtaxed. And we recognize that it's something that has to be done. It's just a matter of figuring out what technology is the best technology to use, because we know that technology is changing constantly. Right. So we're testing things, and we also know that by testing these things and getting them in the ground, that once we know that they work, we'll be able to roll them out across the city. And we're always looking for suggestions from people on what other cities are doing, what others, countries are doing for that very reason. There was a time where I was in Israel, and they talked about it was the same issue, right? Except there, on the reverse side of them, was they were trying to keep water. And being in Israel, that is one of the, I've never seen that green of grass in a place like Israel because it doesn't rain. But what they've learned to do is they've learned to take that rain and hold on to it, and they use it to water the grass. So it's the same principle behind the stormwater ordinance, to hold on to that water and use it for gardening or use it for watering grass or whatever the case may be.
Before we know it, winter will be here, and I know, as a Chicagoan, we love to talk about snow. So can you give us an update on where we are with our snow operations for the coming year?
Well, first I can assure you that we are ready for whatever winter brings us. But I've been in the department a long time, and one of the things that I used to get really frustrated was with snow removal, we had to rely upon people's eyes on the street to tell us what was going on once we moved into the residential streets. So one of the things that we put in place is called turn by turn. And what it is a mapping tool that we've put in place where we've actually had our snow route drivers go out, drive the residential streets. We already have the main thoroughfares mapped out, but on the residential streets, we used to have to rely upon ward superintendents to tell us, yeah, we're done clearing the snow in that ward. We're no longer going to have to do that. Right now, after this year, we'll have 40 of the 50 wards mapped out, where we can tell in real time where those plows have been, how many times they've been there, because every snowstorm is different. You know, there's wind variables, there's cold variables, there's timing of it. Did it hit during rush hour? So those are all things that we have to be aware of. Snow can move out and come back in 2 hours. So we can tell with our mapping tool that we've put in place, and in 2022 we'll have had all the city mapped out, and we'll be able to tell how many times we've been through it or when we've been through there, and most importantly, make sure that we do not miss a side street.
Excellent. Okay, we have a question from Taylor Classman about our recycling program.
Sure.
I had a friend from Cleveland recently tell me that their recycling program is fake. The recycling gets combined with the garbage and is dumped all together as trash. Nothing is getting recycled. But because Cleveland has a contract and because it is no fault of the contractor, China is no longer accepting our recyclables. Domestic recyclers have more than they can deal with, etc. The charade goes on and taxpayers are still footing the bill. Is the same happening in Chicago? Is what is being put in the blue carts actually being recycled? If not all, then how much? Sure.
Well, I can tell you recycling is something that I know that we need to do a much better job at. And I can tell you that we have recycled 60,000 tons of materials that would have otherwise gone into the landfill. That said, that only makes up about 10% of our total refuse that comes in that we're diverting. Chicago's a little bit different than other municipalities because we pick up everything that's in the alley, whether there be mattresses or white goods. In some municipalities, you have to pay an extra ticket to have that picked up. So when you look at strictly diversion numbers, it's skewed a little bit because of the total amount of tons that are taken in. That said, we're approaching this twofold, right? At the short-term level, sometime this fall, there'll be a new contract that there's going to be an RFP put out to find out if there's something out there, whether there's new technologies, there's optical sorting that could improve upon our numbers. So that contract for collection, recycling collection, and processing will be out this fall. In the long term, we're working with the Delta Institute to look at our waste stream. We're going to be looking at organics. We're going to be looking at yard waste, how we handle this, to come up with a much better recycling program, and hopefully we can roll that out. A year ago, we had the recycling partnership look to see what in fact contaminated our recycling. What we found out was that yard waste is the largest contaminator for in our blue carts. Second are things that people don't know are contaminating, such as the plastic that wraps the cases of bottled water, pizza boxes. So for the past couple of years, our focus has been on public education and trying to let people know what in fact is recycling, but we know we have miles to go to get it to where we want it to be. So.
All right, our next question is from Flor Rodriguez. How would funds be distributed equitably among neighborhoods that have been neglected for many years? My neighborhood needs roads to be fixed, new streetlights, sanitation / cleanup, and graffiti removal.
Yeah, I'd be happy to pick up on that one. But did you hear that, everybody? Pizza boxes.
That's
Pizza
right.
boxes. Let's not forget that. Yard waste is first, though. So there are a number of ways that we determine how we distribute our investments into all of this infrastructure. And it's really falling into two categories. There's need and there's opportunity. So on the need side, which is absolutely critical, we're looking at things like, I think you heard the pavement condition index. That is an assessment of all the pavement and what condition it's in and what priorities rise to the top. We have bridge reports, for example, that look at all of our bridges, all 300 bridge and viaduct structures to determine what the needs are so we can prioritize them. There's useful life, there's the age of that infrastructure. All of those pieces combine to help demonstrate what the need is across our city. So there's a very clinical side to that. On the opportunity side, though, we think it's really important that we're aligned with initiatives of the city, whether that's Invest South and West and looking at the 10 community areas and the 12 commercial corridors where we can align some investments, looking at community plans. There have been a number of quality of life plans that particularly are pointing out how a local investment in your street infrastructure could make a big difference or stimulate economic development. There are lots of plan developments going on. And so what we try to do is understand the need, but then also look for these moments. An opportunity might be a funding source that wasn't available otherwise. And so that's kind of what stacks up when we look at our need. But I mean, the fact is that we have more need than we have funds for. Budget director, she knows this, right? Because the challenge is, you know, we have a couple $2 billion worth of high need infrastructure, and that's lights and streets and sidewalks and all kinds of infrastructure. And so what we're working on is migrating toward a multi-year capital plan. That way it's much easier to know what's coming. We can help plan it out, make it visible so the public has a sense of what's coming. And that even enhances the good coordination that we already have. So I definitely appreciate the question because it can feel opaque and you don't know what the special sauce that produces a project.
Right.
But it's important that folks know there's a ton of thinking and work and analysis that goes into it, and we have a long road to go together to catch up on our infrastructure needs.
Yep, and I think part of the 5-year plan that I know we're all collectively working on is to really lay that out across 5 years so that we can really see long term, you know, where all these needs are and kind of, you know, the order in which we need to go. So stay tuned for that because we are definitely working on that, hopefully towards budget. So. Oh, yes. And the other thing I did want to add also is, you know, how can people report where, you know, if the streets are needing repair or a street light is out, where's the best way to send that information?
All right, I'm going to hand out my personal number right now.
That's right.
Ready? It's 311. 311 is a really fantastic way to report what you're seeing. And frankly, we have 2.7 million pairs of eyes in this city that could either use our app, which is Shy 311, or you can call 311 and tell us the need that you see in your neighborhood. Now, I did talk about how we do lots of investigation and we look methodically across the city and do those comparisons, but there's nothing better than hearing it straight from folks who are living in that neighborhood, who can see that the light is out. We need to know about it. We need your help. But I do want to say things like that, we're making big advances, frankly, in using technology to get ahead. So one of the things that we've launched is our smart lighting program. We've been making our way through it, and we have about 330,000 fixtures, 230,000 fixtures that are actually connected across the city. And so we will know the light's out before you even see it. And we'll be able to remotely fix lights, see what the problem is. By this time next year, you know, we'll have 280,000 new smart lighting fixtures. That's about 80% of the fixtures in the city. That is a huge chunk. So, but you know, until we get things like that up and running, we're real close. We definitely need you to call in. And you know, even if it comes down to a pothole, you see a pothole in a bike lane. That pothole, that bike lane, that street, we want to know about it. Send it in, let us know, and we'll get to it.
Excellent. Okay, our next question is from Jonah Berg-Gans. Can bike/scooter lanes be prioritized for street resurfacing? While a pothole isn't fun for anyone, it's an actual danger for those of us riding bikes and especially scooters due to the smaller wheels. Could CDOT commit to prioritizing bike lane potholes in order to promote safety?
Yeah, so as an avid cyclist myself, I know what you're experiencing. A pothole in the bike lane, it's as important as a pothole anywhere else. And so when we do go out and fill potholes, we're thinking about the whole street, including the bike lane. But that's, you know, I'm repeating myself here, but it's important when you see those potholes, especially in the bike lane, because they're not as visible necessarily. Call it in, let us know it's there. But we have every intention of making sure that our bike lanes are in that state of good repair. That's why we launched making sure that our existing bike infrastructure is up to par. And I think it's also important to know that one of the things that we're working on is making sure that we're doing a great job of tamping down those potholes in bike lanes when we fill them. It's different than when it's in the street, when a car can ride over it and tamp it down. It's nice and flat. Bikes are obviously lighter, and so we're working on making adjustments in that way to make sure that the experience is great and safe for everyone. But again, call it in. That's helpful to us, but know that we're out there and we commit to making sure that that infrastructure is as safe as possible.
Great. Okay. Question from Sandra Jordan. Just wanting to know how safe the bridges in the loop are since we are raising them more often. Are they in good shape, and what are your maintenance plans?
Sure. So first off, the bridges are safe, whether they're in the loop or whether they're in the south side of the city, whether they're on the river system up north. Our bridges are safe, and in fact, we have whole bridge crews and inspectors that make sure that they're functional, they're in a state of a good repair, and so first off, they're safe. But we have a lot of work to do. Out of that capital need, there's about $1 billion worth of bridge work that we need to do. These are bridges that are, average age 70 years old, but they are designed actually to open and close. And I know we've seen a few more open bridges this year. You should know that, every year we have about 20,000 bridge openings. They're actually designed to open and close. It's actually something called a bascule bridge, and so it's a very lightweight and a small motor, and then it tilts it up very delicately for as robust as those structures are. And so we are obviously maintaining these all the time, keeping them in good repair. If you've seen one of the great boat runs or the sailboats coming down the river, that's the same process, and the bridge crews are out there opening them and closing them again. So our maintenance plans are marching down to really chip away at that infrastructure need. And as the budget director talked about, as we lay out our 5-year capital planning, bridges are a big part of that.
Right. A question from Cody Suba. Has the idea of selling all the extra water in Lake Michigan been explored?
So I guess that question's for me.
That is for you.
All right.
Sounds like a great idea.
You're going to bail us out, right?
That's right. I'm going to bail everybody out. So it's actually a great idea, but I want to make sure we answer this question in context, right? So right now, the lake is about 3 feet higher than it normally would be. And is it all extra water? That's relative at this point. But what we have looked at is, as far as selling extra water, so Chicago wants to be the regional hub for water, right? Whether it's in the Midwest or whatever the case may be. The greatest part about living in the city of Chicago is that we have the largest body of fresh water in our backyard, right? So we have and any idea is like, the sky's the limit with what we want to do with that water. And one of the things that we've started doing and looking at is, how can Chicago continue to sell this fresh water and get it out to the people who really need it? We know that there are certain suburbs that are outside of our network right now that their aquifers are going to be drying up, and they're trying to figure out where can they get their water from. And they're looking at Chicago for that. And the system is actually set up so that we can expand it, right? So at one time, there was an opportunity to build a 3rd filtration plant on the far north side of the city of Chicago. Maybe that's still something that could happen depending on what the regionality plan is for water distribution. The Sawyer plant out south has the capability right now. We're going through the process of being certified that we will go from being able to purify and treat 750 million gallons of water to 1.2 billion gallons of water over the next few years. Again, taking into consideration of Chicago being a regional water system, getting water out to everybody. The idea of selling water to places like Arizona, California, that's a great idea. Is it economically feasible? I don't know. But I do know that the way the system is set up, and if it's done right, you can build filtration plants and pumping stations all throughout the United States, and and they're all connected to Lake Michigan. It's a matter of understanding what that's going to look like and how much water is going to be coming out of that system and how much water is required to be put back. So we're looking at it and we're exploring it. It's just a matter of seeing what it'll look like.
Okay.
And if I could add, this is a great example of where we all collaborate. We've all seen the lake level manholes come up, and it's all hands on deck. We're all out there playing a role in making sure that we try to mitigate it, the cleanup, putting in barriers, filling out some of the beach areas, including with our friends at the Park District and the Army Corps of Engineers. Those are all responsibilities that you'd maybe not think of our departments, but we are, well, maybe you think of water, but you may not think about that, when there's a major storm, just like, the derecho that landed in Chicago. But the shoreline itself is a team effort in terms of trying to manage it, and it's really an adaptive challenge, right? And it's that kind of, we have some tactics today, but we're working toward a long-term plan to protect the lakefront.
Question from Brandon Lennox. Why am I seeing copious amounts of litter and graffiti in some parts of the city? I'm going to give that to Commissioner Tully.
Well, I can tell you the mayor has told me that she took a walk through the west side and she was concerned about the amount of litter. That said, she did see that there were empty baskets as well. So some of the responsibility falls upon, the storefronts and that to keep their areas clean. That said, we've seen an 8% increase in the amount of refuse that we've collected during this past year with COVID and the number of people that are staying home. So I would assume that some of that ends up with overflowing garbage cans and ends up blowing around. With regard to graffiti, again, like Commissioner Biagi said, 311. We do a really good job of cleaning up graffiti if it's reported.
Right.
We've got that down to less than a 4-day response time when it is reported, so please do call that in.
Question from Natalie Bobrowska. Can we invest in more sustainable building materials, including renewable resources instead of fossil fuels, i.e. using solar roads or even brick roads instead of asphalt?
Yeah, I think that's something that we're all really interested in, and I think you heard from my colleague here about the efforts to think about how we manage flooding, right? Using sustainable materials, thinking about green alleys, those kinds of things. But the fact is, the technology is catching up, right? It's becoming cheaper to integrate these kinds of renewable resources into our materials, even kind of thinking about where the supply chains are coming and going from and the impact on climate, the miles traveled in terms of vehicles. Those are things that we're very interested in. I would like to see us rethink our Green Alley program. We've learned so much about how to manage stormwater. The pilot project that the Department of Water is leading, we will learn a lot from. And so it's how do we apply what we're learning in a nimble way that it's making that difference. So absolutely something we care a lot about. And also when it comes to our fleets, we work closely with our department called AIS that manages our fleet, who are constantly working on ways to find hybrid vehicles, to look for low emission opportunities, and migrate over to more sustainable ways to move our vehicles around the city. So it's really an exciting time, frankly, in the world of sustainability. A lot of territory has been covered, and so now we can operationalize it.
And if I can just kind of piggyback on what Commissioner Biagi was saying, even at the Water Department, we have, outside of the 2 major filtration plants, we have 12 pumping stations, 12 pumping stations that distribute the water throughout the city of Chicago. Those pumping stations, when they were built and fueled by coal. Right? So that's adding to the carbon footprint, as well. But over time, of those 12, 9 of them have since been converted to electricity. And what we've learned to do is we're using more solar panels, using more water energy and things of that nature, right? So be able to again, that renewable source of energy. And what we've been doing is we're looking at the filtration plants, looking at some of the way that we actually treat water. And we're looking at the generators, we're looking at the motors. Again, a lot of the motors have been there since the 50s, since it was built. But how do we do things better? How do we reduce the carbon footprint? And I think that we've been doing a great job with that, especially with the new technology is out, just by replacing those generators, those motors, adding more solar panels to our buildings to be able to use solar power. And what we found out is that for every time that we convert a pumping station, we reduce our carbon footprint by 70%.
Wow.
Which equates to about 270 cars off the road. So, I'm sorry, 270,000 cars off the road. I'm sorry. That's what that number converts to. So because of the amount of energy that we use. So we're constantly looking for new ways and new renewable energies.
Question from Yvette Griffin. Why is the City of Chicago resurfacing streets, then 2 weeks after full completion, digging holes to do other work in the same area, only having to refill the giant holes and pave again?
Well, that's not ideal, and we don't believe that that's happening too often. And one of the things that we do to make sure it doesn't happen is that coordination. We have a project coordination office that I mentioned earlier that is an intensive roundtable that also uses a system called Dot Maps that's actually accessible to the public, where we're able to plug in where all of the projects are happening and then look at where we might have co-located projects. Even just this week, our departments, I know we're coordinating on the timing of a project. You got to get in the ground first,
Right.
get the water done. We come back through and do the piece that we need to do from CDOT. And so from time to time, we may have something get caught in the switch gears, but for the most part, we work really hard at that coordination because we get it. We don't have extra money to spend on these things either.
Right.
And so it's totally in everyone's interest that we are as efficient as possible in our coordination.
And what's that app called?
Shy 311. So you can use that app. That's the same as calling my personal line 311. And so that tell us what you're seeing. If you see this kind of thing occur, we want to know about it. It's a big city, right? We have thousands of miles to keep track of, and we do appreciate when you raise these kinds of things to our attention because we want to make sure that we get it right.
All right. Question from Leah Otto. How much money is allocated for carbon-conscious transportation, such as bike lanes, infrastructure to protect cyclists, public transit, and carpool lanes?
Another great question on sustainability, and I think I'm glad for these because I think it's where our city's consciousness is, and those are all things that we're working on in our own ways. And so much of our work to address carbon-conscious transportation sources, it's not a single line item to do that, which is what you want. You want to imbue it in all of the programs that you're rolling out, and so that's something we do. We are constantly prioritizing bike lanes and infrastructure, but in fact, one of the things that we deliver is the bike share program in the city. Divvy is actually a CDOT city program that is run by an operator to deliver bike share all across the city. And in fact, this year, we added another 50 miles of city to our bike share program. So Divvy now goes from where it stopped at 71st Street, now goes to the city limits. And by this time next year, the entire city will have Divvy bike share in their own backyard. That's one of the ways that we have a huge impact on your transit choices, especially ones that make you feel socially distanced, right, in the time of COVID. And so we are investing in that program. And the revenue that we generate from that operation, it goes right into bike infrastructure. I also want to address some of the things that we're doing with public transit. You've seen on roads like Chicago Avenue, some of our priority bus lanes. You can expect to hear from us very soon on some additional pop-up priority bus lanes, and that's really important right now when we want to run many buses as rapidly as we can, because one, we need to get you from where you are to work or school or wherever you're headed, and we know we need to create a little more space on buses right now. So if we can have those rapid delivery lanes for buses, that's another way that we can make your journey in Chicago more efficient. We can get you home from work on time, and you can count on having a seat on that bus where you feel comfortable. So I could talk about this all day, but there's a lot of things that we're doing. But I appreciate the question, and just know it's imbued in many things that we're doing.
How will residents know where these pop-up bus lanes are happening?
Well, stay tuned.
All right. Can you talk, Commissioner Biagi, can you talk about the alternative modes of transportation implemented and expanded in response to COVID? I know you just talked about the Divvy.
No, but I think we had a specific response, especially when it came to bike share with COVID. So one of the things we launched was a $1 Divvy program. So the price was normally $3 for a single ride. We dropped it to $1. We saw, I think, 20,000 people take advantage of that. We also offered free rides for healthcare workers, a 30-day membership for free. It's still going on actually because we recognize that healthcare workers, that you need to get to work, you need another way to do it. We wanted to make that as easy as possible. And then we also have our Divvy for Everyone program, which if you qualify in terms of income, it's a $5 membership per year. That's something that folks need to know about. That's every day.
Yeah.
So if you're not in that program and you qualify, please sign up for it. And I think lastly, we also dropped our membership price by half for 2 months during the real able, during the stay-at-home order, to make it as easy as possible to register. We had 5,000 new registrations to that program. So there are a number of things that we're doing, but we love the ideas. And I want to mention we have a website, our webpage, cityofchicago.gov/COVID mobility. And that's where you can tell us what you're experiencing on your streets during COVID. And so we launched a big survey. We had several thousand responses, people telling us, you know what, we need more bike lanes. You know what, we need you to actually fill this pothole. Or you know what, we'd like a shared street. And so we used all of that information to actually select some of the shared streets and do community engagement to make sure this was what someone wanted there. So we still want to hear from you. We're also publishing that data so you know what we've done during COVID. But we want to know what you think, and as the situation's evolving, and what we experiment with now, hopefully it's all a gateway to doing really dynamic things in the future, thinking about our future streets and how we'll experience those and what we want out of them. So I obviously love this question, because, but I will encourage you to go to our COVID mobility site and tell us what you think.
Excellent. All right, we have time for 2 more questions. How does, this is actually a good one, as we were talking about our plan. How does the city prioritize infrastructure projects for water or sewer main replacement?
That's a great question. So with a lot of work goes into this, right? And we look at our plan 2 to 3 years in advance, that way we can plan for funding and be able to for design, things of that nature. On the sewer side, we take a look at the 311 calls for flooding. We take a look at how many breaks that we've had in that sewer main and how many times we have to go back and repair it, if it's been lined or not, and what that's going to look like. The way that we look at it is we take those areas and say, okay, again, like I talked about earlier with the hydraulic modeling, to say, you know, again, we're experiencing more 100-year rains. You know, if we do the work at point A, does that actually relieve the flooding, or should we do it at point B and point C to be able to relieve a larger area? Because it's not necessarily about that block; it's about how the entire system connects, so that no one floods. On the water side, it's a little bit different. Again, just with the age of the water mains, going back to the mid-1800s, we take a look at the age of the water main, the break history, the leak history, and any type of work that we've done, the material that it was made out of, the year that it was installed, things of that nature. And we also take a look at coordinating with other departments to see what projects they have. And again, it's about getting in the ground once and being done. Once we go in the ground and replace our infrastructure, theoretically, we don't have to go back for 75 to 100 years to replace that infrastructure. So it's a matter of looking at putting all that together and understanding, again, if I'm doing work in an X neighborhood, right, how does that affect Y neighborhood? And do I need to do a little bit more work in Y neighborhood, or whatever the case be, or on X block or Y block, right, to be able to look at the water system and the sewer system more globally.
So there's a lot of coordination going on, it
Absolutely.
sounds like. Yes. Okay, our last question is a question from Andrew Wilkins. Illinois itself ranks 26 out of the 50 states when it comes to autonomous vehicle policy. With the new era of autonomous transportation upon us, autonomous vans, trucks, drones, etc., what will we be doing to keep Chicago the epicenter of transportation in this new world and encourage new transportation businesses to come here?
Yeah, I love this question, because it is thinking about what our streets do in the future, right? But hopefully the future is now, right? And we want to move up the rankings. So when it comes to autonomous vehicles and this kind of mobility, we've done a lot of work in this regard, thinking about what are the right policies, what are the right conditions for success, and it's something that we should really lean into as a city, because what you can never take away from Chicago is our locational advantage, and that's why we were founded on the amazing Great Lakes system. We have the train system that ran through. Now we have the fiber that runs through, and so we are this epicenter where we need to be able to move goods and services. So we are very interested in autonomous vehicles, and also even smaller ways of delivering. I think one of the things that we're looking at are even like e-cargo bikes. It's not autonomous, but that's a way we can reduce the size of the vehicles that are on our streets that might cause some of that congestion that also has an economic cost, but we can get goods and services moving. And so we will be in lots of conversations, particularly as we see some of the major companies that move freight throughout the world, frankly, that are locating here, whether that's Amazon and some of the other companies that are doing this. We have companies like Uber Freight that are here in Chicago. And so from everything from how they move their goods, whether it's through autonomous vehicles or on our rail system, to how do they get to your front doorstep. We're interested in all of it. So I expect us to be shortly moving up that ranking wherever it comes from. Maybe, I guess, the state ranked itself. But I'm really excited to actually collaborate both from the public side but also with the private sector, because we're trying to match their needs in a field that's really moving rapidly with what we have in terms of infrastructure. So and you look at, I'm railing on here, but you look at like a city like Pittsburgh, for example, that has done a lot of work in autonomous vehicles in partnership with Carnegie Mellon. That's a really smart academic partnership. So we'll be doing sort of an all hands on deck approach, because no matter what, like I said, we are in the perfect spot in this country. We are where your business ought to locate, whether it's through our CREATE program, which is billions of dollars to really unlock conflicts between rail and cars, so we get freight in and out. I think it used to take, 2 days to get from the coast to Chicago, and then 2 days to get through Chicago in terms of goods and services. That is not what we are. We are moving the needle on that every day. So more to come on autonomous vehicles.
Right. Okay. Well, we are out of time. Thank you to all of you for joining me here tonight. I've learned a lot of fun facts, actually, around our infrastructure departments, and I hope everyone did too. Tomorrow, we will be hosting our neighborhood and economic development team here, so make sure to check back at 6 p.m. And lastly, please go ahead if you have more questions or would like to complete our survey. All of that can be found at chicago.gov/2021 budget. Thank you all for joining me tonight, and I will see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.